Prepare for takeoff, please.
It's the Shipping Pod. Hello and welcome to the Shipping Pod. I am your host, Tim Dooner, and I am here with
Ryan Dooley.
Ryan. How are you?
I gotta tell you, it's another good day. It's raw.
Yeah.
It's cold. I'm good though. The world is my oyster.
As they say, and you kind of always want to slap the guy at Dunkin' Donuts when they say, if you don't like the weather, wait a minute. We've kind of had it all, but in the past week, it's been pretty nice though. It's been wet.
Yeah.
But again, another kind of an annoyance is at least it's not snow.
Exactly. I honestly hate all the cliche. I don't like talking about the weather. I like to comment once and just be like, man, it is cold, raw, rainy outside, and just be like, we're done with that. There you go. We've identified the weather scenario and we're out.
Yeah, you have to kind of let go and let God with the weather.
Man, I gotta tell you, we got religious early on this one. I like it, man.
We did, and neither of us like talking about the weather, and that's how we open things. So, sometimes you become the things that you hate the most.
Dude, you are chock full of fortune cookies today, man.
Yeah,
I'm enjoying it.
I've had a good day. I've been very studious. I've done a lot. I've done a lot of studying.
Would you say you've been learned? Did you get learned?
Yeah, no, it has been a learned day. I've taken quite a bit of notes because our topic today is going to be trade under Trump. So we're going to be dealing with free trade agreements, most specifically NAFTA and the TPP. I had to familiarize myself so I don't come across unknowledgeable.
Who's down with TPP?
Who is down with TPP?
Who's down with TPP?
I know, I was supposed to say, yeah, you know me.
Well, not any OG anymore, sir.
That's true. We're really teeing up those musical interludes, too.
We are ready. All right. Take us out, man. You are the god at the helm. Take us out.
Yeah, we'll have to put that in post. That's kind of how these things work. But, so the way this works with Ryan and I is we don't really talk all week. We spoke on the phone for 2 minutes, and we're trying to save all our material for pod. We want to keep everything fresh. We want to rip the Band-Aid off in front of each other.
The way I look at this podcast is this is what happens if you're in the business and you run into each other, sit down at the bar, and just start talking. You people are getting an inside look at two industry insiders and what they talk about when no one's looking. That's what this is. This is you and I at a virtual beverage consumption location.
Yeah, well, a lot's happened since last week. We recorded this last Tuesday. We got it up really quickly, but since then, we have a new president.
We do. I saw a gentleman get sworn in.
Yeah. I mean, and that's kind of what made us, to use a term we're going to use often later on, fast track this podcast because Trump got rid of the TPP. One of his first actions in office, he said he was going to do it all the way leading up to all through the campaign season up until getting elected. And, he was down at that table on Monday, and there goes the TPP. And with it, probably the TPIP, which is the EU version of the TPP.
Yep. These were cornerstone NAFTA, TPP, trade, jobs, international relationships, and how they pertain. That was cornerstones of his campaign. So I think you're right. We had to fast track and go right into this one because there's other stuff going on in the industry to talk about, but let's hit on it while it's hot, man. Well, first, before we do that, did you watch the inauguration on Friday?
Well, and even before we get to that one, because
Okay.
I did, but how was your week in general? What have you done since Tuesday?
Since Tuesday,
Yeah.
I had a good week. A lot of business being done. This is a huge time generally in the shipping industry. For anyone who doesn't know, this is the beginning of what we call import contract season. So it's very busy for us. You're out there for someone like me who's a sales manager for a shipping line. You're spending all of your time contacting shipping lines and making sure that you're on good footing with them so that when it comes time for an RFP or a request for proposals or an RFQ, request for quotations, when those come out, that you're actually invited to them. Because if you're not, then everything's all been for naught. So that's what I was doing. Got to watch the Patriots, if I may say, spank it at bottom on the old boys down there, and
Yeah.
it was a good game. And Gillette was a nice place to be that particular day. And Martellus Bennett dancing like a cheerleader and everything. I liked it. I enjoyed it. So I had a great weekend. So all that notwithstanding, I watched the inauguration myself. I have my own personal thoughts on the inauguration. But overall, I'd say 98% great week.
Yeah.
How about you, my friend? How was your week?
Yeah, over here on my end, we recorded this last Tuesday, which is when I last saw you, and at the time we didn't have a podcast host yet. We didn't really have our Instagram, which I'll plug that really quick. If you want to follow us on Instagram, we post my private collection of pictures of Conley Terminal, some photos of Ryan and I out and about on the scene, industry specific related things. That's on Instagram. That's at the Shipping Pod. You can email us, as some of you have this week, theshippingpod@gmail.com. Also on Twitter @theshippingpod. And so going into that, since that, I got our podcast host. I don't know if you've ever set up a podcast before, but I kind of had to learn on the fly. I knew that we needed a host. I knew that much. So yes. I was doing some Googling, and it seemed like the two best options were companies by the name of Libsyn and Blueberry. Or Burberry. No, Burberry's a scarf. I think it was Blueberry. Obviously, I went with Libsyn because I don't remember the other one.
I was like, I am unaware of the second one. Libsyn worked, though.
Yeah, so
Big ups to Libsyn.
It's the one we're on. And one of the reasons I picked it is, Bill Simmons' podcast is host on there. Bill Burr. They got all the Bills. We don't have a Bill, but we're on that network. It seems reliable. Mark Maron's on there. He's the biggest guy in the scene. So
we're going to get Bill Burr. We're going to get Bill Burr.
Hopefully one day.
One day we're going to get famous enough that Bill Burr is going to be like, I want to come on.
Well, speaking of Instagram, I'm going to brag right now. Do you know who liked our picture this morning?
I saw it. I'm very excited. Loved him on Loveline.
The ace man, Adam Carolla.
Hey, I got to tell you, if we get Dr. Drew, I say we shut it down right there and say it's never going to be as big as it is right now.
I don't know how Dr. Drew would fit into our brand, but if we could, I would still have him.
Exactly.
I
want Dr. Drew to weigh in on his medical advice in the shipping industry.
Yeah.
In transportation and intermodal logistics. That's what I want him to do. Dr. Drew, if you're listening, give us a call.
Yeah. Well, so that's basically what I did. So I got it up. I set up our social media stuff. Started promoting it on LinkedIn. I'm still waiting for them to approve our business page. I'm not sure what they need, but that should be up soon. But, we got the Instagram. We got it up on iTunes now, SoundCloud, Stitcher, anywhere podcasts are found, anywhere podcasts are played. And we had a pretty good response. So thank you all who listened. We had about 500 listeners for the first one. Mm-hmm. And I have not shown you any of these stats yet, but these are directly from our analytics this morning, Ryan. We have listeners in 4 countries.
Nice.
And 16 states.
Boom.
We have listeners in Boston, Mass., Manchester, New Hampshire, New York City, Hartford, New Haven, Burlington, Vermont, Plattsburgh, Rhode Island, New Bedford, Charlotte, San Fran, Oakland, San Jose, Portland, Auburn, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, Baton Rouge, Pittsburgh, Tampa, St. Petersburg, Sarasota, Houston, Corpus Christi, Philadelphia, Dallas, Fort Worth, Jacksonville, Washington, D.C. Thank you all for listening. Hopefully we get all 50 contiguous United States, right?
Indeed.
Well, it'll be 48 contiguous United States, and then the other 2.
I want someone in Iowa to listen to us. I want an Iowan. That's my goal.
Yeah.
An Iowan.
Our Pokédex needs an Iowan in it, and we don't have one yet. So if you're out there in Iowa and you have an internet connection,
heck, if you're not out there, if you just know someone in Iowa, tell them. Listen to these guys; they know what they're talking about.
Yeah, go Buckeyes, right?
Yeah, go Buckeyes.
My sister went to college in Ohio, and she went to Miami of Ohio.
Wait, I said Iowa. I know
you did.
Are we talking about Ohio now?
Well, we need someone in Ohio, don't we? Did we have anyone from Ohio?
Of course we need Ohio.
Of course we do.
Swing state. We need Ohio.
And I thought my little segue that I just thought up was going to be so brilliant.
It was horrible. When you said Buckeyes, I went, yeah, Buckeyes. But then I was thinking, I'm like, you mean like Jayhawks or whatever they're called? Something Hawks?
You're just going to have to bear with me. Yeah, no, Iowa had the Barnstormers, right? That's where Kurt Warner, he was the quarterback who came out of nowhere. Yeah, I mean, AFL?
Yeah, I'll go with you. Sure.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. In improv, you always got a yes end. You got a yes end. Exactly. But anyways, this brilliant segue I thought I had up, I was going to give a shout out to my sister, because she went to Miami of Ohio.
Ooh.
The Redhawks. And do you know who else went there?
Who?
Ben Roethlisberger.
Big Ben.
Yeah. That happened this weekend, right? We had the playoffs on Sunday.
Hey, the Steelers, they did their best.
Objectively, these playoffs have been terrible. And Ryan, I don't know. I don't know if it's just because, I quit drinking, so I haven't been drinking through the playoffs or anything. But man, these have been some really long afternoons watching games. It was about 8 hours on Sunday of blowout football. And I say that objectively because obviously if you're a Patriots or a Falcons fan, well, it's great to watch. But if you're not, and neither of those games were close for very long.
No. They were not. And you touch on a key point. If you're not actively engaged in doing something else and using the game almost as a placeholder for what you're doing, but peripheral at best, you start to really become annoyed with the amount of TV timeouts and breaks and just random commercials and all the nonsense outside of football that you see.
Yeah, it's a thing that I hadn't really noticed before until I decided to take on the NFL football season sober.
Never do that. That's a losing proposition, sir.
Commercials are a lot less tolerable that way.
They're not as funny. Everyone thinks that the football commercials are hilarious. I'm like, well, yeah. If you have 3 big bottles deep at Buffalo Wild Wings, big ups to Buffalo Wild Wings. Almost killed myself on some hot wings.
Yeah, or the commercial that really gets on my nerves is the Chevy Cruze one, where they pretend that these are real people seeing a Chevy Cruze
Is it
for
the one
the first
that's
time.
built into the wall, and then they pull it away, and they're like, hey, it's like a weekend warrior.
They have that. They have the one where the guy confuses it for a BMW.
Yeah.
They have the one where the girl sits in the car and she looks over the interior and she's like, "Wow, I wasn't expecting it to look like this in here." Like, it's got a center console and a steering wheel. What were you expecting?
Wow. I was expecting it to look like the inside of a stagecoach.
Yeah.
It's basically a jet.
Yeah. There's no glass slipper in there for you, Cinderella.
No. Why don't we just... I think we just eliminate car commercials altogether and just be like, all right, just... When you get there, take one for a test drive and figure it out. These car commercials are ridiculous. I get very tired of all of them.
Yeah.
They make it look like... The amount of times where they do a car commercial and they show you what you'll actually be doing with that vehicle is 0 times. How often do you ever get to ride on a completely barren highway and then just power skid into whatever you'd like? It doesn't... Anyways, all right, I'm getting fired up. Let's move on. Let's talk about something else.
Yeah. Well, just, congratulations, Tom Brady, New England Patriots, Bill Belichick, and the Atlanta Falcons. For the Patriots, I'm sure everybody but people in New England may be a little bit sick of them.
I wonder if there are any, because you got Matty Light, BC faithful.
Yeah.
Might be so there might be some BC kid that's just like, you know what, forget the Patriots, man. I'm behind Matty Light all day, all night.
Let's find him. We'll have him on as a guest, the one Falcon fan in Boston.
Let's find the guy that pulled the fire alarm at the Steelers hotel. That guy sounds like a winning aspect.
Not going to lie, I did look around a little bit to see if I could find that gentleman
You just
on
wanted
social
to call
media
him?
and potentially get him on as just a quick guest for this segment of our show.
Yeah, quick note for everyone, don't pull fire alarms.
Yeah. He's a little tied up with court too.
Yeah.
So
he's otherwise engaged. Anyways.
Yeah, so that was my week basically. I was mostly, working on this, dealing with family. Went down to Connecticut. That was nice. But
Was that family that you were down in Connecticut?
Yeah, my wife's mother-in-law and father-in-law lived down in Marlborough, Connecticut. It's relatively close to Hartford.
Very, very good, sir.
Yeah, that's where I watched the inauguration from on Friday.
Ooh. How was that for you?
The inauguration for me was interesting because I know a lot of... He's obviously a polarizing guy, Donald Trump. So it's hard to really take a stance on him or a hot take without offending somebody. I am trying to be optimistic with this president. Obviously, he's a president now. There's nothing we can do about it. And his first executive order is basically dealing with our industry. So it's something that we have to be up on, and because we're also saying this in hindsight, I do like that some of the things he said he's already working on. Some can be bad, but I'm not going to step in politics aside from how it relates to trade. Sure. And insofar as how it relates to trade, I am not a big fan of the TPP. Senator Sanders was not a supporter of the TPP, and Hillary Clinton went as far as to say that she didn't like the TPP as it was currently written. Mm-hmm. So it seems that most administrations that came in anyway that had the chance were either going to alter it or table it, get rid of it to begin with. But, Trump went out there on basically day one, the first Monday on the job, knocked it down, got rid of it, and he's already talking about NAFTA, which we're going to move to. But, yeah, I mean, the inauguration was, it was a thing. The speech, and I rewatched the speech again.
Not hedging at all when you say that, are you?
No, well, I rewatched it again on YouTube today, and
you rewatched the inauguration,
the speech, not like the whole 9-hour some on thing, but I just watched the.
Can I ask
the
a question that has nothing to do with the speech?
Yeah.
What is with the Missouri choir that they had earlier on? Like one of the first singing performance acts that they had. They were singing a song, and I'm sure they're probably good. I'm not a music guy, so I don't know necessarily. If it's not something I like, yeah, I won't recognize it as being like, oh, well, that was an extremely talented performance of something that sounded horrible to me.
Sure.
And all it sounded like to me was that they were just harmonizing tones, but they were obscure. It was like just high pitched, pitching like that. Like, when you're like trying to get your voice ready and they do the pitch pipe and then they go, ah. That's all it sounded like to me. And I don't understand if that was like what they were going for or not.
Well, I would pigpile on the choir with you, but I think I missed them. So I can't say one way or other how this choir performed. But to go back to the speech,
okay,
it was
16 minutes of glory.
Well, no,
is that what you're looking for?
And the only reason I'm struggling for words is because a lot of times when you hear a presidential address or inauguration speech, you want to see sort of a lot of unity. Mm-hmm. So I think my real criticism just of the Trump speech in general, and I do think he has some initiatives that I think are great and some not so much, but it seemed a little bit at times dystopian, and I know other people have said that, but I think it painted a version of America that at least I don't necessarily see. I know people in America do, where manufacturing plants are down, and you can even go places like here to the the Lawrences or the Haverhills of the world, and you can see where manufacturing once was, and actually some of those areas are starting to come around too as they turn those into living studios and whatnot. But the speech kind of painted a somewhat dark picture of America that I don't personally see. But how did you take it?
I don't have anything super positive to say about it, so I don't want to harp too much on it. Like you said, don't want to step too far down the political road.
Yeah.
But in general, I just feel like eventually you have to stop campaigning. It's just one of those things and it's an ongoing feeling that I have. I'm obviously, and I'll flat out say it, not a Trump supporter. That is just where I fall on that.
Yeah. We did a little audio magic there.
Yeah.
little Windows update came in our way, so we're trying to jump back in where we came off. Might get rid of this part too. But so not a Trump supporter, but did you watch any of the after events, like the dancing and whatnot?
No. After I saw the inauguration, that was it. I was like, okay. So I'm not one for the political theater type stuff.
Okay.
I enjoy politics. I enjoy being informed on them. I enjoy discussing them with, educated and informed people. Even the ones that disagree with me, I really enjoy. I have a number of friends of mine with very, very different views, and I really enjoy sitting down with them and having the back and forth, coming with real ideas. I feel the political theater stuff, the inauguration balls and all the other nonsense, and just the random general speeches and stuff like that, even his CIA speech and stuff like that, I'm like, I just don't care for it. I don't want to know it. Get in the office, do your job, let me know how it works for you. But anywho, moving on.
Well, then you missed his lovely dance with the First Lady, who she had some stunning dresses. I'll give her that much. The dance, And I only say this, I'm not a great dancer myself, but I am a little bit critical because for my wedding, my wife made me take dance lessons. So I had to go through the entire process and do the dancing.
I feel that the listeners would like to see a short video of you dancing.
We might have one. We might be able to get that on the Insta or Snapchat or something. I did get us a Snapchat, but I don't even know how to use it. I'll have to have someone tell me what to do on Snapchat.
I can help you there. That's
Okay.
the one social media platform that I've become, somewhat familiar with in the last couple of months.
Well, I'll just come out. I mean, Trump looked like his feet were nailed to the dance floor. He could have lifted the legs a little bit.
Yeah.
But, they had some mosaics. They had some people writing out numbers with their bodies. It was, it was a thing. It was a thing. Seen better, I've seen worse inaugurations. Not going to sit here and argue with who had the most watched one or attendance. That seems like a bit of a distraction to everyone.
It seems beyond a distraction so much as it seems like a pretty fair... It seems like a pretty obvious thing, so we'll just skate over it, man.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like something you could quantify with ratings, but who knows?
Numbers.
Fake news. It could be. It could not be. But you know what's not fake news, Ryan?
What's not fake news, Timothy?
What's not fake news is these free trade agreements that have been coming up. And that's the real meat of our program today.
Free trade, you say?
Free trade.
Free trade.
The FTAs. Our program today is going to be about trade under Trump and what that means insofar as what we know right now.
Indeed.
And Trump, as we mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, has not really wasted any time. He's already tabled, he's already shelved the TPP, so that's out. And we'll get into that when we get over to it. And NAFTA, he wants to renegotiate.
Hey, Tim, what is NAFTA?
I'll tell you, Ryan. NAFTA is the North American Free Trade Agreement. It's a free trade agreement between Canada, Mexico, and the United States.
I like the way you teased that out there. I didn't know if you were going to mention the United States, and then bam, right at the end.
Well, sure.
Tease it for me.
You have to. I mean, it's been around since January 1st, 1994, so 23 years now.
Hey.
But some people may not have heard about it. Trade isn't the most talked about subject on the news. But at the time, so it was initially brought up back in 1992. The initial version of it was signed by the Mexican president at the time, Carlos Salinas de Gortari, George Hubert Walker Bush, so the first President Bush, and the Prime Minister of Canada...
Is it Hubert or Herbert?
Herbert.
Oh, you said Herbert?
I did.
I thought you said Hubert, and I was like, oh my god, have I gotten his name wrong all these years?
Fake news. I deny it. And the Canadian Prime Minister, Brian Mulroney. They said that at the end of December, they really wanted it. Bush wanted to fast track that through the Senate. It didn't happen in time. Clinton came into office. He ended up being the one to push it through the Senate. He added a couple of addendums to it. But at the time, NAFTA, pretty widely supported proposal. It didn't have sort of the venom and the vehemence towards it that the TPP does. So what did NAFTA do? It's an acronym, but what was it there? What was it there for? The point of NAFTA was to immediately eliminate tariffs on half of Mexico's exports to U.S. and 1/3 of U.S. exports to Mexico. By year 10, it would eliminate nearly all tariffs except for some on U.S. agricultural exports.
Let me ask a question here that some people that might be either coming into the business or in the business and not be 100%. When you say tariffs, meaning what?
Oh, a tariff's just a dutiable rate put on a good. They're used, in a sense, as a form of protectionism. So if you're a tire manufacturer in the United States, and the auto industry will come up, because that's actually trade under Trump. Trump has actually used the auto industry as kind of his model of things, as we've turned to talk about GM and Ford and the plants in Mexico, which all relate back to NAFTA. But when they're talking about NAFTA, what they're talking about, and specifically what Trump is talking about, is that right now in Mexico, for example, a factory worker is paid $6 an hour versus someone that is a part of the auto union in the United States makes $28 an hour on average. So if you're the GMs of the world or the Fords of the world or the Nissans of the world, you're going to do what a lot of these companies did in the 90s, which was move their factories down to Mexico. And they also have agreements with China to bring in low-cost goods, and puts it in a sense that the American can't compete against. So there's tariffs and there's trade agreements, but a tariff in general is sort of to discourage bringing a product into your country and kind of level the playing field with the producers of that product within your country.
Okay. So in a short summary, if I'm following you here, is that by reducing tariffs, you are reducing restrictions on goods being brought into the country, therefore making it easier to bring in and export goods.
Yeah, and through a number of ways, not just by the cost of the goods, but also through regulations. A lot of FTAs deal with reducing regulations or eliminating regulations or imposing less strict ones. They're really far-reaching, and when we get into the TPP, that one really has the meat of it, because that had over 5,000 pages of legal aids in it, and regulations that dealt with everything from the public health sector, the national health sector. It was dealing with prescription drugs, IPs, copyrights, incredibly wide sweeping trade agreement. But NAFTA itself is kind of a little bit more simple, and NAFTA already had a model. So when NAFTA came into effect, it was really, the point of NAFTA was just to kind of bring Mexico into what the United States and Canada were already doing. And the United States and Canada already had a U.S.-Canada trade agreement, so that was sort of the model that they were going off of. And again, it was basically a way to make North America a strong economic partner when there was also, you had Europe, you had Asia. So the real point of it, though, again, as we went back to, was to remove tariffs as much as possible between the two countries.
Sure.
Create intra-block trading. And what did it do? So you had
intra-block, meaning referring to the three countries.
Yeah, so intra-block would be Canada, Mexico, and the United States.
Very good.
And so as we said on NAFTA, the previous free trade agreements between the United States and Canada had already kind of been in motion. It was sort of the Romney care to NAFTA's Obamacare. And what it did for Canada, though, is it has increased trade between those two trade partners, intra-block trading by 11% since it's been in effect. Some of the industries that they thought would go down have actually increased, sort of, the furniture business. But most part, Canada doesn't have a problem with NAFTA. They haven't really said anything about it. It hasn't been an issue. The benefits to Mexico were almost immediate. Mexico has things there called, and I hope I don't butcher this pronunciation, but maquiladoras. Maquiladoras. Oh, so you know.
I know.
Okay.
Oh, I know things, baby.
Well, if you don't know, for those of you who aren't as smart as Ryan, or maybe not as well educated in Mexican manufacturing plants, it is a Mexican assembly plant. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what it is, and it became a landmark of trade for Mexico. They're plants that moved from the U.S. since the implementation of NAFTA, basically to put together the auto manufacturing, to put together cars, as we discussed, to put together anything that's going to be fabricated or imported and assembled, and then in a lot of cases brought up to the United States duty-free through the Mexican border.
Yeah, they were essentially they were somewhat glorified free trade zones in a way, where you would export raw materials, they'd go down there, be assembled, and then they would, or excuse me, I shouldn't say export, Mexico would import raw materials, assemble them there, and then export them elsewhere, and a lot of times back to the importing country. And it works out a lot to their benefit because they get it both, as they would say, coming and going. They're making money on it being imported. There's jobs to be had with the actual manufacturing of it, and then they're making money on the export side of things. So it's got its own set of benefits there directly to the Mexican people. And that is maquiladoras. It's important to roll your R.
It sure is. And, well, the interesting thing about the maquiladoras, too, is they kind of supplanted a lot of farming and agriculture that was going on in the regions that they were put in. And with that, they've actually seen some increases in wealth in those particular areas. According to this study, 15.5% increase since the implementation of NAFTA.
Yeah. NAFTA invented the middle class in Mexico.
It's also, they've become the second largest importer of U.S. meats. And another sort of benefit of NAFTA is reduced...
Who's the first importer of U.S. meats? I didn't look that up.
I'm going to think maybe Canada. Who else would import our meats?
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
I'm going to look that up.
Yeah, we're going to look that up. And
Hey, here's a question for anyone listening.
Yeah.
I will send them a Mass Maritime keychain if someone can give me the answer of the number one meat importer.
All right.
Above Mexico.
You heard him. The shipping pod.
A Mass Maritime keychain.
The shipping pod at gmail.com, or you can tweet us the answer at the shipping pod. Ryan will be happy to facilitate that, and he can pay the postage since he put that up. But, so Mexico has benefited quite a bit in a lot of ways. Their trade, the interblock trade for them has increased 118%. So, with Canada was relatively awash with only, 11%, I think we said. So 118% for Mexico. So Mexico really, really saw the boom of this. Not necessarily financially, but they saw business picking up. They saw their agricultural change. It obviously had some ramifications. And for the United States, too. How did the United States benefit from this? Well, our interblock trading went up 41%. So at the start of NAFTA, in 1993, we had traded about $337 billion between Mexico, U.S., and Canada. That has grown to $1.2 trillion as of 2011. I realize that that's 6 years ago, but I didn't have any better stats than that. But that's a fairly decent run. So There's a lot of trade going on between these three countries.
Now, one of the key things, though, when we're having this conversation, it's also important for us not to look at these things in a vacuum. Like
Sure.
what you're talking about when you say boom. Some of the information that I looked up and some of the ones that I reviewed there, take the Harvard Kennedy School. They have a lovely podcast there that I was listening to for some background information on some of this stuff. They made what I would think is a pretty salient point. It went up by X%, which is good, but it's referred to as modest as opposed to robust because there was also evidence to support it was going to go up anyways. So 47% increase, not all 47% of it can be attributed to NAFTA, but at the same time, you have to attribute it to NAFTA because it happened on that watch type of thing. So there is, and this is not to say an argument against NAFTA, just so much as it's important just not to look at the numbers as a pure up and down, this is happening in a vacuum. You have to take it with that thing where, like, take the example, the salaries of today don't necessarily buy more than a salary did 40 years ago. Everything went up. The cost of goods went up. The cost of living went up. Salaries went up. It's one of those things that you have to look at everything in its own context type of thing.
Yeah, cost isn't nearly as important as cost relative to your actual income because that's your actual buying power. That's the buying power of your people. That's the buying power of a country.
If Coke still cost a nickel, I'd buy cases of Coca-Cola.
Yeah. I mean,
for $5.
Are you a big soda drinker? I don't think I've ever seen you drink a soda before.
I used to have a severe soda addiction, and I cut it out about a year ago. In hopes of starting to lose weight. Now I replaced it with significant amounts of cheese and bread.
Yeah.
But yeah, the soda I have reduced. Now I drink soda water.
Well, at least you're still getting the calories.
Hey, Pola Cola.
Yeah,
I love those guys.
that isn't bad. I never developed a taste for soda because in my house my mom would always buy Diet Coke. Mm-hmm. So, and I don't know if you've ever gotten used to diet soda, but if you
Diet Coke.
But if you try to drink a regular Coke after you've gotten used to Diet Coke,
it's like a crack high, man.
It's
crazy.
No, I can barely even do it. It makes my throat too fuzzy. So I'm not a big sugar soda drinker. But you bring up a good point. You can't just look at things in a vacuum, or you can't single things out. So what I did here is I went through some pros and cons and through a number of articles that I read, there's about 6 pros that I came across, and I'll just rifle through these real quick for you.
What do you got?
Well, so the pro, we touched on it. It quadrupled trade between U.S., Canada, and Mexico. It lowered costs, especially for Mexicans, for cost of living, products, in some ways as much as 50%. So they were able to kind of enter the global economy and get
more
products.
cash on hand.
And they were able to get more cash in hand in some instances, in some pockets of Mexico. A third one that a lot of people found was the economic output in trade areas such as agriculture, automotive, even the service sector. They all increased because it opened the borders for U.S. healthcare, things like that, to be brought into places like Mexico and Canada, and vice versa.
Indeed.
Foreign investments tripled since then. U.S. businesses have invested $452 billion in Mexico and Canada since the formation of NAFTA.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's doing things like building factories, whatnot down there. And that could be a good or a bad thing when the way Trump addresses it, wanting to redo deals. I'm sure he sees a lot of that corporate money going down, not to the U.S., going just because it's a part of NAFTA. That doesn't mean it's good for the U.S., but just going down to Mexico to pay people low wages and to undercut American workers. But in general, if we're just looking at this objectively as a trade agreement for NAFTA, what have they done? They've increased foreign investments. And the last thing that they really did, a lot of people have found, most economists are in agreement that NAFTA reduced government spending because contracts became more competitive, more manageable. They were able to open it up to other countries. So in that sense, the government was able to spend less money. You had more options. But spending less money also means somebody else gets paid less money. I guess that's how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you got for
the cons?
What do you got for your cons? And then we'll do a what does that mean to you?
Yeah. Well, the initial con of it is that initially there was a loss of 700,000 jobs, mainly in Canada.
680,000, but who's counting?
Yeah, well, no, we saw them and you'd see them around the border. So we saw them in California, Michigan, Texas. And it was really kind of the sectors we keep going back to, but it was motor vehicles, textiles, computers, electronic appliances, diodes, things that can be made cheap. That's what happened.
Sure.
Which leads into job migration. I mean, it severely impacted the ability of U.S. factory workers to negotiate their wages. Threats of, moving to Mexico were widespread amongst companies, especially in those 90s. So when you had, auto workers unions or any union trying to fight for a more competitive wage, they could just say, you know what, we're going to just turn tail and go to Mexico. Adios, amigo.
Yeah.
And that's sort of a big thing that happened. I don't think I mentioned it under the pros, and maybe I just didn't write this down, but I do remember reading it. And although they say that we lost 700,000 jobs, a lot of economists project that several million jobs were created via trade in the United States alone by the increase in import and export along the border. I'm not exactly sure how they quantify that number. So, but just to be fair to the loss, 700,000 jobs lost does sound bad, but there was some replacement occurring. So
there was some replacement. If I can weigh in on that one here, is that when you say I don't know how they quantify it. It's an unquantifiable apples to apples comparison because you lost, let's call it 700,000. You lost 700,000 manufacturing jobs. We knew where those were. Now they're not there anymore. Very obvious. All the jobs that you're talking about for the other side is going to be like, okay, well, now we're going to have more CBP agents at the borders. Now we're going to have more import and export specialists. Now we're going to have more people that work for these companies in the jobs that are, sourcing and procurement people. I mean, these are industries that were developing more positions. So I would question that number to say that it was several million as opposed to, some kind of a more balanced, close to a 700,000 number. But there definitely was more work created than is mentioned when you're talking about things and like, oh, should we stay in NAFTA? People only talk about the jobs lost. And when they talk about jobs created, the only quantifiable numbers you can have are like about 50% of that, because they talk about the jobs created in the actual manufacturing facilities that the jobs were lost.
Well, you bring up a good point too, because when a lot of people talk about jobs lost, they act as if the freight industry and the brokerage industry isn't hiring or doesn't have employees.
Well, that's the thing. When people say it's like, oh man, we lost the jobs, we want to bring them back. I was like, just so we're very clear, they're not coming back. I mean, we can stop the ones from leaving.
Yeah.
But bringing those ones back is very unlikely.
Well, and I think I may come back to this, but one of the things Trump had done is he tweeted out and he'd mentioned to GM and Chevy, I believe GM's moving their factory back to there, and that's supposed to create 700 jobs. But when you talk about 700 jobs, I mean, that's a small middle school.
1% of the ones they were talking about losing.
Not even. It's not there, but we'll have to see, and that's kind of what makes this thing interesting. But just to close out some of the other criticisms here on on NAFTA, surprisingly, NAFTA worked to put a lot of Mexican farmers out of work because U.S. beef and agriculture started becoming really cheap, and trade of goods like corn and whatnot across the border had sort of really changed the dynamics of Mexico's economy. Not that you can do any of these trade agreements without altering something. You can't move one stick without making the tower shake. Or is that Jenga?
I was going to say, I was like, lovely Jenga reference.
It is Jenga.
Can't pull one block without making the tower shake. I'm with you. So what's the sum total of it, Tim?
So-
I don't want to beat the people up with the early 90s history, but, NAFTA's going on. It's on Trump's bullseye board
Yeah.
that he's looking to go after. So why don't you tell me, from your take, should we stick with NAFTA or should we pull from NAFTA? What's your take?
Well, let's do Trump's take first, because Trump has some sound bites on this one. He's got some quotes, and he's already said, and he's put into motion, he's talked to the Prime Minister over there, to discuss NAFTA with Canada and with Mexico in the next 30 days. Trump has called NAFTA the worst trade deal in the history of the country.
May I ask one question? Is it me, or does he use a lot of hyperbole when he's talking?
I mean, I think he does.
The worst deal?
There probably were worse ones, but, well, what's a worse one off the top of your head?
Well, Woodrow Wilson tried to create the League of Nations and then failed, so I'd say that's a bad deal.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would contend that the worst trade deals are the ones that didn't happen.
Not necessarily.
That's true.
A bad trade deal
Well,
that doesn't happen is better than a mediocre trade deal.
Yeah,
that
you're
did.
right. And when we get to the TPP, we're going to see why, because that one's a little ominous. NAFTA, we've kind of been running around with. We've had it in place for a while. And so what does it mean? So Trump has had Sean Spicer, the spokesperson at the White House, discuss this. And he said, if they, and by they he's referring to the President of Mexico and the Prime Minister of Canada, come in and express willingness to renegotiate NAFTA, they could negotiate within the current parameters. If they don't, and Trump decides to pull, then we would have to go back to the drawing table in the future. So, they haven't said much, right? They said they're negotiate things, and with Trump's sort of rhetoric about this, it seems that the main sort of sticking point, especially with his sort of focus on the auto industry, is not really Canada.
Okay.
Right? He doesn't seem to be coming after Canada or have much interest in changing anything that's going on between the U.S. and Canada.
See, this is my ongoing, sorry, not to cut you off, but this is my ongoing problem with the whole Trump trade discussion on all fronts.
Yeah.
Can anyone tell me a very specific point that he wants to lay heavy on? I've heard the statement, NAFTA is the worst deal ever, and Bill Clinton was horrible for doing it, and blah, 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 blah. So what specifically is troubling him? That's the part that I'm not picking up. And I've been trying to pay attention to this. I mean, granted, I'm no political pundit, so I haven't seen every single speech he's given. But the salient details are, he doesn't like it. That's it. Does he have anything in your notes, or have you heard anything where he has specifically said, this provision of NAFTA is my problem?
No, well, in a sense, he has, because you have to kind of read between the lines when coming at this particular topic. So what's come out of the White House so far, and what he said himself via Twitter, is he's mentioned things such as putting a 35% tariff on automobiles coming up from Mexico. Mm-hmm. He's also talked about using tariffs to make Mexico pay for a wall. So it's going to be very interesting to see what he intends to do with these negotiations towards Mexico. And again, Canada has kind of been left out of this, but how do you have a North American free trade agreement where Canada, for example, is, basically coming in tax-free, and then we're levying all these taxes against Mexico?
Yeah.
So
I did see one article that said that the Canadian political officials had said he does not seem to be as concerned about the northern border. So that was a little between the lines of, yeah, you're probably right. It's more of a Mexico thing for him.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Stephen Schwartzman, who's a Trump advisor, he told reporters who asked him yesterday, he said that Canada shouldn't be enormously worried about what's
There
going
you
to
go.
happen with this. So, I enormously, again, that goes back to that hyperbole. It seems like that, that's the vocabulary that I guess the administration's going to use. But everything's got to be big, right? So Canada, please don't be enormously worried.
Yeah.
We don't know, but we'll see what happens with Mexico. I mean, when I should have read this at the beginning, but so when we talk about Trump's, for one of the first things he did when he got in office was he put Trump's trade deals working for all Americans. And he kind of outlines on here on the website that for too long, Americans have been forced to accept trade deals that put the interest of insiders and the Washington elite over the hardworking men and women of this country. As a result, blue-collar towns and cities have watched their factories close and good-paying jobs move overseas, while Americans face a mounting trade deficit and a devastating manufacturing base here. And it kind of goes on to say this, and it mentions the TPP and NAFTA. It mentions what he already did, pull out of the TPP, and it mentions the renegotiations with NAFTA.
My problem I have with all these things is I think it's pretty easy to pull out and throw rocks at it
Yeah.
than to get in there and change it.
Well, some people may be listening right now and saying, he's the president, but could he pull out of NAFTA? Well, to answer that question, actually he can. There is a provision in NAFTA that with 6 months' notice, as long as they let Mexico and Canada know, they could withdraw. Mm-hmm. And that is basically what Trump is threatening to do right now to get everyone at the negotiating table.
Seems like an over-the-top threat. Seems like a somewhat unnecessary threat to levy towards people, just to be like, I'm going to threaten you, who we are all supposed to be in concert partners here for everyone's benefit. I'm going to threaten to leave unless you come to the negotiating table. This is where I start picking apart with these things, is that I'm like, I'm just not clear as to what does he think the outcome is going to be. And that's why I wonder, I'm like, what's the upside, what's the downside? What is the today upside of us not being in NAFTA? But here's another question for you. With all of this stuff and all of his anti-NAFTA stuff and there seems to be a lot of people that support this, saying, oh yeah, I agree with Trump. We should be out of it. We should just be worried about our American stuff and leave everybody else to fend for themselves. There's no evidence supporting that it would have been better absent of NAFTA. There's no evidence supporting that it wouldn't have increased a heavy illegal immigration standpoint, because the Mexican economy would not have improved as fast as it did with the NAFTA, so it would have created other issues at home along the borders. I don't speak too much to Canada because, frankly, I'm not as well versed on that side of things, and I can't speak to what their economy was over the years. But it just seems to me that it's a lot of rhetoric without a whole heck of a lot of information cited, and that's fine if you want to take that stance on international terrorist organizations. But as far as domestic trade goes, you can't throw out these landmark statements and then not back them up with anything.
Sure. Well, if you're a Trump supporter, I think that you do have to be happy, though, that he did immediately go to the table and do this thing with the TPP that he said he was going to do. And I think with this administration, if he does say this about renegotiating NAFTA, I have to believe that he is going to do that. So something is going to happen. Yeah. And the only real indicators...
What?
Well, okay, so I was reading an article, and it was with the Mexican president, Penanito, and is that right? I don't know. Someone can correct me. I don't have a keychain to send you, but
good point there.
I don't know. I may be
No
misrepresenting.
keychains for everybody.
The president of Mexico has stated that if they are going to renegotiate NAFTA, they have to have some provisions in there, and he's obviously tempering his language because of rhetoric like sending back all the illegal immigrants to Mexico, building walls and whatnot. So I think that if something does go into place, Mexico is going to try and put into that trade agreement a process for sending, migrants back to Mexico. But it's going to be hard to see. I mean, I don't think we'll see a 35% tariff on cars, but Mexico's in a tough place too, though. If they lose that status with the United States, it's going to make things relatively difficult for them. And when you talk about, the corporations that are already vested down there, they're going to have some issues with this too. But obviously the administration wants those to occur. They want manufacturing to move back to the United States. So I don't think these negotiations are going to be softball at all, Ryan. I think that NAFTA during this administration may be withdrawn from. I wouldn't be surprised.
I don't understand how anyone in the just general public is okay with the amount of secrecy involved in all of these trade agreements and the amount of non-disclosure ahead of time.
I am glad that you brought that up because that's a really, really good segue into the TPP. And the TPP is one of the most maligned trade agreements, I think, that I've ever read. Everyone I know that's in the tech industry, I mean, it goes throughout industries, throughout walks of life, and even throughout parties, as we mentioned earlier, the three candidates. I mean, Republicans generally are for trade agreements, and that's sort of where Trump veers in a lot of places from the hegemony of the Republican Party. But
Good word, never even heard that before. Hegemony.
Well, he steps outside of the circle there, especially in this TPP thing. And so let's do some history on the TPP. How familiar with the TPP are you, Ryan?
I am well read on it in the last, I'd say, year. I've become well read on it. So,
are you familiar with the P4?
I am not. Is that the original 4 countries?
Sure. So how
Pacific 4 would it be?
Basically, well, the P4 was a trade agreement between Brunei, Chile, New Zealand, and Singapore, and that started in 2006. So that is the forebearer, the beginning of what eventually would become TPP.
See, I did not know that.
Okay, well that's where it started out.
Okay,
and that was kind of the test pilot, the model, kind of like how NAFTA had the Canadian-U.S. free trade agreement prior to it. So what is TPP now, though? Well, TPP is they started a summit in about 2010 discussing it, and drafts WikiLeaks started releasing drafts of this thing in 2012, 2013, an environmental policies one they had let out. And the reason why is, as you mentioned, these free trade agreements are done, behind closed doors. Mm-hmm. Nobody knows who's in that room. Nobody knows which advocates are in there. Nobody knows what's being put in there. And the TPP itself was almost 6,000 pages long.
Yeah.
So I doubt very many people, especially lawmakers, have even read the damn thing. Yeah, I mean,
nope.
I'm sure the only one who's read that thing cover to cover are lawyers.
I'm sure.
And the corporate lawyers who are trying to get the most out of this free trade agreement. But what is it? So the TPP is it's 12-country agreement that border the Pacific Ocean. They all signed up in 2016 for it. I believe Japan is the only one who actually ratified it, but they still had time. It wasn't the time limit yet. So up until, I guess, right before Trump became president-elect, this had been signed by Obama to go through, so the U.S. was planning on ratifying it had the administration not changed, obviously. And the 12 countries are Japan, Malaysia, Vietnam, Singapore, Brunei, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Mexico, Chile, Peru, and of course, the United States.
Very good. That's a solid team right there. I'd play for that team.
Well, do you know why they wanted to form this sort of conglomeration? What the point of the TPP was, and more importantly, why a couple big names weren't involved?
Why don't you share with me? Because I just know one thing: free trade is important for human rights.
Well, it could be, but a free trade agreement like this may have some other significance behind it.
What you got?
Well, you heard of China, right?
I've met.
Yeah,
I've
pretty big trading country, and there's
they got some people there. They got a couple guys.
And then your other big one is, of course, India.
Yeah.
So, and you would see they're remiss. They're not in the TPP. They're not included in that because the TPP is basically a voting bloc put together, or a trade bloc put together by these 12 nations to give themselves some more strength and to solidify themselves within the Asian market.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the APAC market. And that's kind of, on paper, that's what got them to start writing and to increase trade between these countries.
Sure.
But what did the TPP become? And I know you've read some articles, so let me hear what you got on the TPP, and I'll fill in any blanks you leave out. But shoot, what's the TPP as you understand it?
My understanding for the TPP is that it is similar to NAFTA in the sense that it reduces tariffs for the trade of goods, materials, as well as you've mentioned a couple of times, the IP, the intellectual property stuff, and also the medical field. I mean, it's a lot of the same things for the NAFTA provisions, except it's being done with the Trans-Pacific partners that we're describing, and that's TPP being the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and taking it a step further into this, because some of the articles that I was reading is that there's a lot of different models when it comes to trade in general, and you pointed me towards a very well written and I think a very easily digestible comic there. I'm gonna mispronounce that. What is it? The Economics Comics there.
Yeah.
Which I will ask you to lob that up on our Twitter, and we'll get that up on Instagram and stuff, because I think people should read that. It's pretty impressive on trade, but it goes into a lot of provisions about, in the reduction of the tariffs, we can export our capital and import goods from other countries. Excuse me, I always get that confused. We can export our capital, import goods from other countries. However, there's that direct correlation between loss of sovereignty, loss of jobs, loss of a whole bunch of stuff, as we saw with the NAFTA agreement. So I don't know if I'm being too macro, if there's something specific you wanted me to touch on there.
No, you're doing a great job, Ryan. I mean, the pros on there, and with every trade agreement, there are pros and cons, and what most people sort of agreed, in at least in some aspects, that could be good about the TPP was that, on paper, it should stimulate growth, especially within that region, and it should stimulate U.S. exports. They were projected to potentially grow by $305 billion by the year 2025. I'm not sure who necessarily came up with that projection, but it did remove 18,000 tariffs placed on U.S. exports. So one of the big problems, in our field and with the U.S. as an exporter is that there's a lot of barrier to entry in other countries that the U.S. doesn't necessarily have. I mean, if you think U.S. trade and regulations are incredibly stringent or hard to deal with, they're really not. The U.S. is not a tough trading partner in comparison to many, many other countries who won't let, for example, U.S. automobiles in there. That's a big, again, that's going to be a big sticking point. And when we get to sort of his take on that, he specifically mentions that that's an issue. There's also some environmental protection. So I think a pro of it as well is you have a lot of countries out there that aren't up to a U.S. standard in terms of their environmental protection, in terms of their regulations,
sure,
in terms of their laws, in terms of copyright. A lot of manufacturing on specific things in pharma isn't done in overseas area because of fear of the IP being stolen. Well, we'll go to the cons. Right into the cons, you mentioned the sovereignty. One of the big cons was that it allowed corporations to sue governments for losses.
We just passed that law last year. That the sovereign immunity clause in the what's that? The 9/11 bill there.
So wait, we put a sovereign immunity clause in there, but they were
we removed it.
Oh, okay, because the TPP, a big thing that they were trying to do was to introduce the clause.
Indeed, that's part of the Australian issue that they had down there. Like one of the perfect examples of one of the cons against it is that Australia's cigarettes have a rule that they don't allow people to use their copyrighted images on the packages of cigarettes. So the packages of cigarettes can't have Joe Camel on it. They can't have the Marlboro Man. Not that we do that really anymore, but you get the point. They can't have the red and white Marlboro box. They all have plain boxes. Now, the Australian people saw this as a huge coup for them, or as a great thing, because it reduced smoking by something like 40%. I don't have that figure in front of me, so don't quote me specifically on it, but it reduced it by a very significant amount, and they were able to attribute it to the copyrights. Well, with the TPP, I think it was like 6 years ago, Big Tobacco there, I believe it was, Philip Morris, brought a suit against the Australian government saying, not allowing us to utilize our copyrighted information is against free trade. And if we're in the process of trying to develop a free trade partnership, us not being able to use our copyrighted material is a strike against us. It makes it harder for a U.S. company to sell against an Australian company. And that decision is, still pending, to my understanding. I don't believe they've actually they haven't come to an agreement on it yet. But the point being is that allowing individual corporations to sue governments, I mean, that's going to tie up courts for years. And I mean, there's going to be that. I mean, there's a case to be made anytime someone is unable to get their product into market. There's a case to be made for what are the factors applying against that. And if the factors are imposed by anyone other than one of their competitors, well, that's free trade infringement right there.
Well, I mean, one of the biggest ones, too, is happening in Europe. Swedish energy company Vattenfall is suing Germany for billions of dollars because of their decision to phase out nuclear power after Fukushima. Mm-hmm. The Germans decided they weren't interested in the nuclear power industry anymore. You know, Vattenfall had investments in there that they were putting into Germany, and they are suing Germany for losses to billions of dollars. And this is sort of the expanse of things.
Well, that's welcome to capitalism the hard way.
Well, isn't it? I mean, those are sort of the big criticisms on it, and not just Trump, who we'll get to, but you know, Noam Chomsky warned that the TPP is designed to carry forward the neoliberal project to maximize profits and, well, I'm going to cut that out and reread that. Noam Chomsky warned that the TPP is designed to carry forward the neoliberal project to maximize profits. Fuck, Noam Chomsky. Never mind.
You want me to read it for you, buddy?
No, I can't read my own handwriting.
I was going to say.
I'm going to cut all that out.
The literacy problems in America, my friend.
Yeah.
But
so Robert Reich.
Give me the gist of it, man. Give me the gist of it.
Okay, so Robert Reich, former Secretary of Labor, he called it a Trojan horse in a global race to the bottom. Senator Sanders, he said it could have ended up being devastating for workers' families. All it really does is enrich larger corporations. And that's kind of all we've heard on it, because there is so much wide-sweeping power to copyright IP. These ISDSs, which are, you know, sovereign dispute mechanisms, they're a way, again, as we mentioned, for companies to go and sue governments. Just to step back for a second, too, just to get a couple more cons in here.
How many more cons you need, man?
Well, see, it strongly reinforces patent and copyright regulation. This will reduce the availability of generic drugs in pharma field. It creates a regulatory nightmare for tech companies, content owners. It also creates an avenue for patent trolls. But really, if you just want to think of it in the simplest terms, when you're talking about generic drugs, it makes life-saving drugs more expensive for the consumers throughout the world, actually, to buy. And it really makes companies that can really only operate within the United States or what, it gives them a lot more power, a lot more latitude, and a lot more political stroke to globally manipulate wages, currency, any number of things. It's really hard to find someone that says that this was a fantastic agreement. This is something that we want to stand by. And ISDS too. You said we should mention acronyms when we mention that. That is Investor State Dispute Settlements. Mm-hmm. So now this is gone. Trump got rid of it, but what did Trump say? Trump had some very harsh things to say, and maybe this will be an indicator for what goes on with NAFTA. But these are some quotes from Trump on the TPP.
Nothing like some broad speculation to kick in there.
Well, you know...
maybe this will be what he does next time.
Well, I'm pretty sure, because in terms of his rhetoric here, he went right into it. So if we have to think about how he's going to approach NAFTA next, recent history could be an indicator.
Anybody can pull out of something that you haven't already been doing.
Sure.
I would like to know, what is the economic projection on the NAFTA side if you just say, screw it, I'm out. Pulling out of NAFTA. I want to know what the economic impact is that. Because if you're sitting there telling me there's an absolute yay or an absolute no, and we've all been wrong for the last 20-something years, I would challenge that. There's no way. We've had Republicans, we've had Democrats, we'd have a bunch. If you mean to tell me that the head of The Apprentice is the only person that found the solution to NAFTA, I would be shocked and appalled.
Well, so Trump called the Trans-Pacific Partnership is another disaster done and pushed by special interests who want to rape our country. Just a continuing rape of our country. That's what it is, too. It's a harsh word. It's a rape of our country. He's also said, will make NAFTA, in his opinion, look like a baby.
I don't know what that means.
Make NAFTA look like a baby?
Make NAFTA look like a baby.
Yeah, so he called NAFTA previously, I think it's a little bit of a callback to what he'd already said. He said NAFTA was the worst trade deal in U.S. history. So this is like the adult... This is the big version. He's making an analogy, right? He's saying that NAFTA will look like small potatoes compared to this global mess that we're going to get ourselves into with the TPP.
Gotcha.
Right?
No, I still don't see that analogy, but I'm with you. Okay, I get what you're trying to tell me.
Well, because it includes more. It includes more countries. It includes more principles. It's way more wide sweeping.
Sure. Hey, I'm with you. I don't know. I'm sorry. The baby analogy just did not get me. It did not land. My bad.
Yeah, and it's.
All right. So tell me, where are you on this, Tim? You've told me what NAFTA is. You have told me what ATPP is.
Do we know what TPP? I still feel, and I've read
TPP. I'm sorry. That's an internal acronym that I have at my company.
Yeah. No. Wipe my butt with this TPP. No. So we've talked. So we've both read quite a bit about TPP. We're in the industry, and I think like a lot of people too, we're probably glad it got canceled and it got written out because we still don't understand the entire thing.
Yeah.
But from what we do understand, it seems like it was not a good deal for the United States of America. Mm-hmm. Of Trump's first moves, it seems like maybe he was right here.
Possibly.
Is that how you feel?
I honestly don't know. I got to tell you, this is one of those ones where, yeah, I think there's a lot of downside to it. I haven't seen a lot of the upside to it, so I'd say, if I had to put it this way, if I had to vote on it like a ballot measure, I'd vote against it. I don't think it's as bad. I don't think it's as lightning out. I don't think it's as lights out horrible, because I think there's other aspects to trade that we're completely ignoring here. One of which being when Russia tried to invade the Crimean Peninsula, one of the steps we took to try and prevent us having to go to war over it was to impose trade sanctions and freeze assets. If we were to go into, a trade partnership with some of these countries, and like the ones you said, I was like, hey, one of his other campaign promises is to pick a fight with China. It's like going into these things and dissolving any of this relationship that may or may not have taken place. I don't know. I'm not a military expert either. So not being a geopolitical, economic, or military expert, I'm aware that there are trade implications when it comes to other aspects of our world other than the guy who works in a factory in Michigan. And that's where I feel that not just Donald Trump, but our entire political system has failed us in not explaining the pros and cons from that side of it. I want to know what the other implications are. If it's a straight up and down vote about, hey, this is going to hurt people's jobs here in America, sure, of course, I'm against that. If there's other impacts, though, I'd like to know what they are, and I find that very hard to analyze.
Well, it is tough, and when you go through these trade agreements and you start reading these papers by economists, a lot of them will point out that it's very difficult to look at something like NAFTA and completely quantify job loss. And a main reason for that is you're looking at a number of factors, because NAFTA didn't happen in a vacuum. In 2001, the World Trade Organization gave China partner trading status, basically. So China had passed what they needed with the WTO, and it really opened up the market in China more so than anything. And that's where the majority of manufacturing is done. That's where even the currency manipulation that Trump keeps talking about and other economists have talked about in dealing with unfair trading partners. And that was a sticking point for Trump in the TPP. He said that there was no language in the 5,544 pages of the TPP that dealt with currency manipulators. But a lot of economists, they don't look at NAFTA. They look back to 2001, and they said that as many as 2 million U.S. jobs have been lost to China, which pretty believable. I can imagine that happening. But again, that's where it comes back to this murky area where it's really hard to say what's going to happen when a butterfly flaps its wings at the Maquiadora.
Well, tsunami in Japan.
A tsunami in Japan.
According to the butterfly effect.
Well, the butterfly effect, we mentioned it. What about the lawsuit between the Swedish energy company? Germany sees, the tsunami over in Fukushima. They decide to pull out of energy, and next thing they know, they're getting sued by billions of dollars because of some trade agreement they forgot they ratified.
Yep.
Gotta read the fine print.
Yeah, always read the fine print. It's funny, a friend of mine was telling me about, he just found out that his house loan, his mortgage rather, was sold to a different bank, and that bank is controlled by a Chinese corporation. So technically right now his house is owned by China.
Yeah, I mean, I would believe it. Well, the TPP, one of the issues with it too is it was allowing U.S. companies, and it was also dealing with deregulation of banks. So a lot of the protective elements that had come in after 2008 that we enacted. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. The TPP does deal with it, but there's a second agreement too that I don't know if it's really mentioned, and you have to go around, but there's a very similar thing to the TPP, almost the same language in the bill, the TPIP, with the European Union. And that is basically as good as dead, too, with the TPP, because there's no way the Trump administration, if they didn't want to... There's also issues in the EU of them not wanting to move forward with it and whatnot, and Brexit happened and those kind of things. But yeah, there was a secondary one out there, basically the same model as it. So if one had gone through, perhaps the other one would. If one didn't, the U.S. is the linchpin. In order to ratify the TPP, the U.S. had to be involved anyway. Without them, it is dead and buried. So, just to wrap it up then, what does that mean for Trump moving forward? What he said about the TPP, as he was defeating it, was that he would prefer to go to, instead of having, a unilateral, a multilateral, wide-sweeping trade agreement that brings in countries with less to offer than others, he would prefer to go to each country individually and work out trade agreements based on who the country is, what their buying power is, what sort of weaknesses we have in their market, and whatnot. So I don't know if that's going to go to all 12 countries involved or the other 11 countries involved in the TPP, but that seems to be the plan right now, is to, aside from NAFTA, and I don't know how quick he's willing to get back to the TPP, because I think China is really what he wants to put his focus on afterwards and trade with China. And wow, that's going to be a whole other can of worms. But I don't want to put words into Trump or the administration's mouth there. They're plenty good at putting words out themselves, and they're not shy about press releases or tweets. So we'll learn about this as this go on. And Trump's our president for at least the next 4 years, so we'll continually be discussing and monitoring these trade agreements. Mm-hmm. I hope this overview was okay. To me, it felt a little bit disjointed, but I guess that's what trade agreements are. They can be a little disjointed and a little murky.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those ones that it's a dense topic and there's a lot to cover, so it's not something that you can sit down and in an hour and be like, okay, this is what it is. I mean, it's a very tricky. They pay a lot of people a lot of money to be able to understand these things.
They do. I would implore, I guess, if you're listening to this, you're interested in the TPP, not reading the 5,544 pages, but reading some articles on pros and cons in it. It's just interesting to keep your eye out to make sure they don't pop up in the next trade agreement. These things tend to get renamed and rewritten quite a bit. There are other things like SOPA, PIPA, who've been, passed around, very close to ratifying, not ratified. A lot of it deals with stuff that's not necessarily trade, but more sort of copyright issue. Tech's a big thing in there. So I'll be curious to see. I mean, and Trump too, you don't hear a lot about talk or copyright with him. He seems to be very keyed in, as we've mentioned, on the auto industry. But I guess as soon as we know more, we can kind of bring that into the fold and discuss. I'll also be happy to hear from any listeners who kind of have opinions on this, who are affected by, TPP. If you were looking forward to it for some reason, let us know. We'd be happy to hear it.
Yeah, I'd love to hear somebody that's very pro it, because believe me, there's everybody out there that'll tell you why it was bad. So I'm kind of curious as to, it had to have enough supporters to get going forward enough to be this far gone.
Well,
So there has to be people out there that liked it.
well, Liz Warren and Donald Trump hate each other.
Really? You don't say.
Yet, they do agree on one thing. They didn't like the TPP.
There you go.
So, if those two can at least agree on one issue,
There's
maybe
hope for us all. There's hope for us all.
maybe it's okay. Do you have anything else to say about the TPP?
I still stand by the only other thing, and it's kind of a global statement about trade agreements. I don't understand how it is possible, beneficial, even allowed to happen, to be done in secret. How this isn't one of the major things that's being debated on C-SPAN. If we're going to spend, 900 hours on different military aspects and covert operations and doing hearings and hearings and hearings on that, why can't we dedicate at least an hour a day on C-SPAN or whatever to cover what's being discussed on these trade agreements? They're done in back rooms and then gets rolled out and it's supposed to be fast-tracked, et cetera, et cetera. Even if it takes 10 years, people didn't start even knowing what this was until about 4 or 5 ago. So,
And that was basically because of leaks. I mean, draft documents were leaked by WikiLeaks in 2012 and 2013.
So that's my final thought on this, is that one of the things we should demand as a people is we should demand to be brought into the fold on this. I think it would be a heck of a lot easier to digest this information if it was brought out as it was being negotiated, as opposed to trying to sit down and catch up on 10 years of negotiations in one sit. So says Ryan Dooley.
Well, Ryan, I'll let you have the closing remarks on this one as we move into the next thing. As we said, the podcast went up live last Tuesday.
Yes.
We've gotten some tremendous feedback. Thank you to all of you listeners. We've heard on Instagram. We've heard on Twitter. We've gotten some emails, and I was just going to read one listener email.
Go for it.
Why not? And it wasn't a question. This was just some praise, but we received this email.
We enjoy it.
Tim and Ryan, I'm new to the transportation shipping industry and just started working as an account executive for a freight forwarding company headquartered out of Kansas City, Missouri. I'm located in Charlotte, North Carolina, and just wanted to say a quick thank you for starting the shipping pod. It sounds like, based on your vision of what you want the podcast to be, it will be a great resource for a newbie such as myself. I look forward to future episodes, and although limited in knowledge and expertise in the industry, will gladly act as a resource in the Southeast. Thanks again. Sincerely, Mark Yu. Hey, Mark Yu, thank you very much. Welcome to the industry. This is exactly why we started. That's I think a great email for Ryan and I both to hear.
Exactly.
And one of the reasons I think that we like to key in and focus on new people is because they don't know any better when we say something that's completely wrong.
Yes. I like to say it with conviction, and then people just think I know what I'm talking about.
They really do, and if you just keep bulldozing ahead...
Press on, brother. Press on.
And that doesn't remind you of anyone, does it? Fake news. No, let's move forward, though. But those are really nice ones. Do you have any other praise? You hear anything? Or should we move on to the events calendar?
I will say we appreciate everyone's feedback, good, bad, or otherwise, so keep it coming. We've heard some good things. We've heard some stuff. Some people had some concerns about our use of acronyms, so we are trying to work on that. So keep on with the feedback, folks. Keep on with the feedback.
We appreciate it. And as we're wont to do at this time, if you want to reach the Shipping Pod, you can do so at theshippingpod@gmail.com. We're on Twitter at theshippingpod. We're on Instagram at theshippingpod. We're on our podcast host, Libsyn. The Shipping Pod's there. iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher. However you digest podcasts, we're there. If we're not somewhere, let us know. We'll get there.
Find us on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
Let's link up.
We want access. We'd be happy to read your questions on mail, too. If you have some import questions or export questions, freight, brokerage, whatever you got, let us know. We'll do our best. And now, moving on to the events calendar. Ryan, tomorrow we have...
The Scale event.
We do have the Scale event.
The MIT Scale event, which my understanding of it is it's going to be some discussions on the transportation industry as a whole. We're going to be sitting down with some of the people from the supply chain management program at MIT. It's my first time going there, so I don't have anything specific to add to this other than to say I will go, I will learn something about it, I will come back, I will bring it to you.
This is the 9th annual MIT Global Scale Network
Yes,
Supply
it
Chain, Student, Research, Expo, and Networking Night. The informal networking begins tomorrow, 4:30 p.m. It officially starts at 5 and runs to 8. It is on the 6th floor of the Media Lab at MIT, 75 Amherst Street, Cambridge, Massachusetts.
This is true.
And like I promised last week, I tweeted the details, and I followed that link, and you know what, Ryan? I registered for this event.
You going?
Yeah, I kept it a surprise for you.
Ah!
Yeah.
I'm stoked.
I'll be there.
Hey, we will have a mighty crew going then. We have many people from the Connect Young Professionals going to be attending. So there will be we will have a strong contingent. It will be a solid evening all had by all.
What time are you heading down there?
I'm actually going to be coming from up north.
Uh-huh.
So I'll be there. I'll be in the city early tomorrow. Actually, I'll be in the city probably around 2 or 3.
Got you.
And so I'll probably be setting up shop at a local Starbucks to do some work and such. But I've got to go meet some customers in the morning and in the midday. Go have lunch with one of my wartime consigliaries in the trade industry, one Mr. James McCarthy, former chairperson of the Connect Young Professionals.
Wow.
And
see James tomorrow.
And his number 2, Steve Lopez, who's now a current youngin in the industry there, and we'll all be sitting down grabbing some lunch before the event. Which you should come join us if you have nothing else to do, but you have children, so I would not expect that to be logical.
Yeah, I do. I'm not sure. If I do get down there early, I'll definitely let you know. It's good to know you'll be there early, so I might. Oh, yeah. I mean, it starts at 4:30. I don't know. I might head down like 2:30ish.
Yeah, I'll be there plenty early. So yeah, we'll definitely.
I'll get there around like 3:15.
Sounds good.
Ish.
Yeah, buddy.
Maybe get a nice iced coffee.
Exactly.
You had the ice cold brew at Dunkin' yet?
I have. It's good.
I'm a fan.
Yeah.
And I usually don't like Dunkin' coffee. It's a little weak. I'm more of a Starbucks guy.
Yeah. I'm a true Dunkin'. I run on Dunkin'.
Yeah. I would guess that. If I just saw you walking down the street, I'd be like, he's a Dunkin' guy.
Yeah. I look like Casey Affleck in that Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
Skit on Dunks. Yeah. That's what I look like. Just on any given day. If you look on Instagram,
yeah,
you'll see that's not really me. That's not what I look like on a regular basis. I look like Casey Affleck, Carhartt, jeans, long beard, scraggly.
The move that killed me in that one is when he's holding the butt outside the door smoking.
It's beautiful.
I've seen so many dudes do that.
I love it. I love the argument he gets into it when the guy goes, "You can't smoke in here." He goes, "It's not in here. It's outside."
Yeah, it was a great bit.
The spiking of the coffee on the windshield at the end too. That's fantastic.
Did you see Manchester by the Sea?
I did not yet.
I didn't either. My buddy, he told me that he saw it and he liked it, but I can't trust him just yet because he's in a relatively new relationship with a girl, so he's going to films like that and maybe having some rose-colored glasses on. Although it was,
I didn't know where you were going with that.
No, yeah, it was well
having some rose-colored glasses.
it was well reviewed.
So you mean
right?
He's just happy in life.
I think he's just happy in life, so it's hard. And I'm not singling out Manchester by the Sea. I'm just saying I haven't rushed out to see it at the theater yet.
It's been nominated for a bunch of awards. It's won a lot of awards. It's been nominated for others. And typically, movies that are nominated for Oscars and big awards, I don't care for. Just based on history. Just based on history. This is not like a snobby thing so much as I just typically don't like them.
No, real quick, before the next event, what's your favorite Boston movie?
I'm gonna go with. I really liked The Town. I thought that was the best out of all the most recent Boston movies. The Town was good.
Strong choice. I am not gonna go with The Town though. I'm gonna give you Gone, Baby Gone by Dennis Lehane. Film by Ben Affleck.
Yeah, Casey Affleck was in it. Ben Affleck was the director.
Director of the movie.
I thought that was the best portrayal of the people of Dorchester.
Yeah, did a fantastic job.
Yeah, like specifically the scene where he goes into the bar.
Yeah,
and they almost get beat up, but then he pulls the gun on the bartender. I felt like I knew some of the people.
He tells him he's got an A like a Skippy jar.
Like, make my martini.
Oh man! And one of my favorite scenes from that movie is the second they walk out of that bar and it's like the light of day, and it's just like that blinding light. Like if you've ever gone day drinking, I know we've never day drank. No, but when you've got day drinking, you walk out of one of those dark dingy. There was just it felt.
It feels like a laser is going through your face when you get hit with that sun.
It really does. It wakes you up and gets you ready to get down that block.
It wakes you up, and if you're smart, it reminds you. It's like, I should not be driving. I think I'll walk home.
Yeah, call an Uber, guys. Don't drink and drive, even if you're in a Boston movie. But what else we got here? Well, Valentine's Day. We got
the Pharmatech.
Yeah, that is the Pharmatech. We got the Connect Import Seminar on biotech, pharma, medical. That's at the Pine Conference Center, Southborough, Mass.
Southborough.
Yeah, so if biotech, pharma, that kind of stuff interests you.
Hey, if you're out there, go to Rapscallion Brewery. It's not too far from there.
Actually, those things are very informative. I've been to a Connect footwear classification one. That was pretty strong stuff.
Was that at the Reebok facility?
Sure was.
I would imagine.
The old one, though. Have they moved yet? They're moving, aren't they?
Yeah, they're moving into Boston there with the... I don't know if it's fully called a divestiture, but with the separation of the operations teams between Adidas and Reebok.
Yeah.
Adidas moving down to Spartanburg, South Carolina, which had already existed down there, but they're moving the remaining group up here, the Adidas group, from the Reebok. And Reebok's moving into the design center, so I have not seen anything on that move yet. I don't believe it's happened yet, but we'll definitely have to check with our Reebok counterparts in the Connect organization. That would be the Coalition of New England Companies for Trade, and which they're a member of. We'll check with them and find out what the status is. I did not see Betty Little as I had anticipated. She's a Connect member and a member of the Adidas people, so I didn't see her at the last meeting that I went to, so I will have to follow up.
I just spoke to her on LinkedIn. She's doing very well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is she still with them, or did she end up...
I think she is. She is. We didn't talk shop, but she said she wants to connect. So Betty, if you're listening, I'll be seeing you relatively soon.
Hey.
And we'd love to have you on as a guest. You're a brilliant woman who knows a lot, not more just about footwear, but the industry in general, as well as Connect.
As well, my friend. Yes.
So what do we got? What do we got next? There's something else in February, 2/28. It's the 23rd annual International Business Forum and Networking event. That's at the that's put on by the Boston Export Center. That's at Morgan Lewis in Boston, 5:30 to 8:30. I mentioned that one last week. That's well, I don't know. I said from a sales perspective, I didn't find that one super valuable, but maybe if I was on the ops side still, or in something a little... I mean, it was a lot of, like I said, it was a lot of embassy people. But if you're looking for something to do, at least it's tangentially related to the business, or you really want to get out of the house, there's that one. I think it's cheap. It's like $40 or something.
I would advise people, if you've never been to an event and you're a salesperson and you think there's a possibility that it might be good, I say go for it.
Yeah, go get your reps, right? Just start getting used to talking to people, get over the social anxiety and the fear of approaching people, and kind of learn how to just engage people out in public.
Aside from that, and it's something I disagree with in some businesses, is that they want you to quantify the value of these forums and these different seminars that you go to. And there's some things you can't quantify because you don't know. You might meet a guy who has nothing to do with your business, but he's a guy that knows a guy that knew a guy that can do something for you. And the only way you can do that is to get out there and, like you said, jump over the hurdle of any social anxiety you have, talk to the people, get in there, and you can ask the questions that you need to ask. You can say, oh, you work for... Take that example. Oh, you're an operations category manager for Reebok. Do you know anybody that's working on the logistics and intermodal field? No, but I know the compliance person. You reach out to the compliance person based on their referral. They can always direct you to the procurement people or the supply chain people, and that's the way you track it down. Not to mention you can always domain shop, where you get a business card and then you find out the guy's real name, and that's how you get an email.
Yeah, that's always a handy. You can see the structure of how they do the emails and what the corporate box is. See, that's a free sales tip.
So there's my sell for that particular conference there. Even if you don't think there's a sales value to it, go.
All right. Maybe we'll be there. One last one we have for now is 411, 21st Annual TNT Connect Trade and Transportation Conference. That is a 3-day event, Ryan.
Yes.
Takes place in Newport, Rhode Island.
It does.
It's at the former Hyatt Regency Hotel. Mm-hmm. It's called like Gurney's or something to that effect now.
You know, I have another one here that I was going to make mention of. The New England Seafood.
Oh, yeah. Seafood show at the Seaport Center, right?
Yeah. That's coming up before the trade. And I want to say that's March 21st. Let me bring that up for you, though.
Yeah, if you're a fishmonger or the broker of a fishmonger, might be might be a good event for you. Ryan's just looking that one up really quick. Actually, I was just over there recently. I was at
March 19th to the 21st.
I took my son to an auto show over there.
Where was that? At the Expo Center?
Yeah.
Nice.
He he's only 2. But
did he enjoy it?
he was good for about an hour. He liked sitting in the big red trucks. Didn't like any of the sports cars. He was all about the red trucks. I think he told the guy at Nissan that his cars were ugly.
Yeah, they are.
They were in brown. I was I didn't know who they were going for with their brown cars.
No,
I did ask the guy if they're still making the Cube. He said no, they canceled it a few years ago. So they got that wart off their face.
Well, I missed the Pontiac G6 hardtop convertible. I liked that car.
Dude, there's probably some Cube driver right now who's just like livid that
I was going to listen to this podcast, but now I won't.
I just dissed his Cube. I'm sorry, I'm just not a fan. I don't like asymmetry. I don't like the asymmetry that car presents to me with its weird side window.
I don't care for the boxy looking things.
I really don't. The train transportation, though, we mentioned that last time. A great event. Probably Ryan and myself's favorite one. 3-day event. First night, there's a networking event. Second night, there's a dinner gala. And the third day, you're usually, want to check out of there. But good time. If they are interested in that event, Ryan, where would they go? Would they go to connect.org?
Yes. www.connect.org.
That'll have information on that, as well as the previously mentioned import seminar on the biotech and pharma. You want to sign up for either of those, they're on there. Let's see here, the scale event at MIT, you want to go to that. Details are on Twitter. Might be a little late. It's, by the time you hear this, we're probably going to be there. And yeah, that's about the Boston Export Center.
Boston Seafood, the seafood marketplace for North America in Boston, located at the Boston Convention and Exhibit Center, March 19th through the 21st. You can look it up on www.seafoodexpo.com.
I've been there. It's a good time. I had to run a booth there once, the Derringer booth.
It's good. I got to tell you, that one is that's a quality event for all parties concerned. Purchasers, people trying to sell, people trying to network. There's a lot of key people there. Everybody and their brother sends somebody there.
Well, my compatriots at Derringer, who were pretty happy to go because they all eat fish. I don't eat fish, so for me it was hands off the merchandise. But
well, if you get in there with the right group of people, there's also crazy hellacious parties thrown by all the major seafood companies. We
did the cheesiest thing ever. So these guys are all from Canada, and our first day after walking the booth, they wanted to go out and get some drinks, and I was like,
Did you get Sam Adams and a cup of chowder?
Even worse, dude. On St. Patrick's Day, we went to Cheers.
There you go, buddy.
They wanted to go. They wanted to do the super touristy thing.
These all guys from Vermont?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there you go.
Two fellas from
Burlington.
3 fellas from there, actually. We had 3 guys with us. It was a great time. I don't think I'd ever been to that Cheers before either. So it's the original Cheers, but I don't think I'd had anything from there.
Oh, the one up in like Beacon Hill or whatever it is.
Yeah, and we didn't. All we had was like Guinness beers and shots of Jameson.
Why don't you take them to the actual Faneuil Hall, the replica Cheers?
Oh,
the one that looks like the show.
They would have nothing other than the original Cheers. They would settle for no less.
All right, just for anyone who's listening in California, St. Petersburg, Tampa, San Antonio, all the people that are not from the Boston area, there are multiple Cheers locations, because there is Cheers the Show, which was written about, what's it called, the Bull and Finch?
I believe so. I believe.
The actual bar is called the Bull and Finch. The front of the bar that they took a photo of that they used for the front of the show in Cheers is actually another bar located up in Charlestown. So there's actually 3 separate locations. There's the bar it's about, the bar they used for the frontage picture, and then there's a replica of the TV show bar located in Faneuil Hall. For my money, I say take people to the replica in Faneuil Hall. You're going to enjoy it a whole heck of a lot more than going to the other bar. Because if you go to the other bar, you're just paying extra for beer. You could go right up the street to the 21st Amendment and have just as good a time. But you wouldn't be able to say you were in the actual Cheers. But you could say that you were in the Gentleman's Club where John F. Kennedy used to hang out. So, there you go. A lot of things to go on there.
Yeah.
Nothing caps off a podcast like Ryan Dooley's recommendations on beer.
Well, I was just going to tell you that, because you mentioned if you don't like seafood, the seafood show must have been rough. So that was the point of my Cheers story. We went there on St. Patrick's Day, and the next day was not a fun day of working a A booth at a seafood expo.
Oh yeah, being hungover and not liking seafood, that must have been pleasurable.
But you know what? Have you worked a booth at something like that before? So
Yeah.
all that really happened was people kept coming up to the booth and like stealing our pens and keychains and anything that's not nailed down. They tried to take. We had a fishbowl for a raffle that you could put things in. Someone tried to take that and put that in their swag bag.
People just wander around those things. You'd think they'd never bought a pen before, because you want to tell people, you could buy any pen you want for less than $1.
Yeah.
It's like coming over here to take this free one just so you can say you have a free pen.
I know. Against all odds, I was able to at least leave with our table, and Daringer was able to keep their banner. So you guys in Vermont still have that. And
there you go. I was at the Mass Export Expo one time,
yeah,
and someone came and took my computer bag off the thing and started walking away with it thinking it was a freebie. And I had to go grab and be like,
Wait.
We're not giving away a used Acer bag.
Are you sure that's not like legitimate theft?
There was nothing in it, so I'm going to give them benefit of the doubt.
All right.
But it very well may be. I mean, we were in the transportation building, and they have a lot of foot traffic there that has nothing to do with transportation because it's a T stop.
Yeah.
So it's not the most evenly dispersed,
Sounds good, Ryan. Well, any more thoughts? Do you have a closing summation on trade or the future? Oh, you know what? Next week we already have a topic for you guys. It's going to be Chinese New Year is next week, and that's going to be our topic too. We're going to talk about Chinese New Year, the GRIs, what kind of implication that means on trade, the history of Chinese New Year and trade, and what you need to know about Chinese New Year if you're an importer or an exporter, right? All things. It's the year of the chicken, is it not?
I don't know what year it is, but I know
rooster.
I'm done with China. I am tired of Chinese New Year already, though.
Well, I'll know what year it is by the time we record this next episode. Okay. For Ryan Dooley, this is Tim Dooner, signing off from the shipping pod. See ya next week.
I love my country, indeed I do. I've got the blues, I've got the blues, I've got the alcoholic blues. No more beer, my heart to tears. Goodbye, whiskey, you used to make me frisky.